Dumelang. Welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Manyatela. It's great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, the SABC has rejected the DA's ad which depicts a burning flag unless the ad is amended. The public broadcaster says it doesn't want to fuel outrage and believes the ad goes against the spirit of nation building. But is this decision justified? On what basis is the SABC rejecting this ad? We'll hear what the SABC said to ICASA in rejecting this DA's ad. We'll also bring in the DA's Helen Zille to respond and bring in a law consultant to help us understand the regulations around political ads and the mandate of the SABC. And then later, there are two vibrant young leaders who have formed political parties that will be contesting elections for the very first time. And they will join us tonight to discuss their campaign, their prospects in these elections, and their promises for the electorate. Rise Mzansi's Songezo Zibi and Bossa's Mmusi Maimane face the nation tonight. But first, my comment. So the SABC has decided it will not air the DA's much talked about advert, which depicts a burning flag. The SABC says it will only do so if the ad is amended. They've written a letter to the Communications Authority, ICASA. The national broadcaster in that letter says the advertisement encourages the damage of treasured national symbols. And the national flag is a national symbol which represents diverse elements of the country and national unity. The letter goes on further to say that it's expected that the national flag should be accorded with dignity and respect. Thus, the flag is not a representation of a political party, but the nation at large. As a responsible public broadcaster, the SABC says it does not want to be part of fueling outrage that is evidenced on divergent media platforms. So they say, in the spirit of the South African constitutional values and principles of national unity and nation building, the desecration of the national flag should be condemned. The SABC goes further to say, as the public broadcaster, it is mandated to promote nation building through its services, and the said political ad goes against the spirit of nation building. So they've also noted some of the words used in the advertisement in question that are subject to a formal complaint lodged with ICASA against the SABC. Therefore, they say allowing this ad to be broadcast will be prejudicial to the public broadcaster. So they've encouraged the DA to amend the advertisement and resubmit it for broadcast. Now, the DA has responded saying that it's briefed its lawyers to challenge this decision by the SABC, calling it an attack on free speech and the suppression of the opposition. I want to read a statement that the SABC has also sent us here on Face the Nation, because we requested that they join us for a conversation. And their response says, and I quote here, the SABC can confirm that the corporation has informed the regulator, ICASA, that it will not be able to broadcast the Democratic Alliance's advertisement. The SABC believes that the advertisement encourages the damage of treasured national symbols. The national flag is a national symbol which represents diverse elements of the country and national unity. Additionally, it is expected that the national flag should be accorded with dignity and respect, and the SABC, as a responsible public entity, is unable to encourage any action that is contrary to this. Thus, the flag is not a representation of a political party, but the nation at large. The DA is requested to amend the advertisement and resubmit it. That's a statement we got from the SABC. Now, I am not sure, I'm convinced that this was the best way that the DA, in fact, the SABC could respond to this DA ad. And let me start with the ad itself. I think the DA could have used other metaphorical symbols and I want to be clear first about where I stand on the ad. The national flag is a symbol of unity more than anything, which is when the separate groups of people in South Africa came together as one nation. When you look at the two separate lines of the Y on our national flag, they represent the racial segregation of their past, these different groups, and how they came together as one nation for their future. So for me, the ad with a depiction of a burning flag attacks the core of this country. You're effectively breaking the cultural norms the flag represents. With all that divides us, we should all find unity within the flag because it represents the hope of this nation. And I believe that the flag should be beyond politics. Now, that's my view. But I'm conflicted about the decision the SABC has taken. And this is not the first time, by the way, that the SABC refuses to air some political parties' ads. It's given valid reasons before. But in this case, as much as I disagree with the DA's ad, and as much as the SABC may feel the desecration of the national flag should be condemned because it goes against the spirit of nation building, I don't think its reasons are enough to justify the decision that it's taken, unless what the DA has done violates ICASA regulations. And yes, freedom of speech does allow you to use the flag as you may see fit. And there are regulations saying that the flag must be treated with some respect. That's the expectation. This includes never letting the flag touch the ground or being used as a tablecloth or being used as underclothes. In fact, according to the South African Vexillological Association, which was formed in 1990 to promote an interest in and study of the flags of Southern Africa, that's what they say. So there are no rules against the burning of the flag as much as I am against it. So if a decision is made that the ad is rejected by the public broadcaster, it's got to be based on something. It must violate something. And that's my view. I don't think it's sufficient to say, oh, this ad has caused outrage or it doesn't contribute to nation building. What regulations and laws does it violate? Because my understanding is that ICASA gives guidelines on what's permissible for political adverts for each election. And if the SABC bases this decision on the violation of those regulations and guidelines, then absolutely, that makes sense. If the SABC bases its decision on the ad's violation of maybe the electoral code of conduct for political parties, then I can understand that. But these are not the reasons that are provided for this decision not to air the ad. Is the ad offensive to me and other people? Yes. Is the ad controversial to me and other people? Absolutely. But what is freedom of expression if you don't accept the views of those you disagree with? We have shows here on the SABC where we can bring in experts to explain why having an ad depicting a burning flag is wrong or why it's right. And the viewers can decide for themselves. So the public broadcaster can use its platforms to educate viewers about these national symbols. And it appears to me that the SABC is basing this decision on editorial policy and not on the regulations around adverts. So my question to you tonight is, do you think the SABC's decision to reject the DA's election ad depicting a burning flag is justified? Please send me your WhatsApp voice notes right now on 078 459 1897. Remember to tell us your name and your surname and where you are sending the voice note from. And please keep the comments for 30 seconds. Alternatively, you can send us an X at Face the Nation SABC. After the break, Helen Zille, who's with the DA, responds to this decision by the SABC. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, the leader of the Democratic Alliance has accused the SABC of censorship. This after the SABC wrote a letter to the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa of its decision to reject a political ad from the DA that depicts the burning flag of the South African flag. Now, the SABC, as I indicated earlier, stated that it believes that the advert encourages the damage of treasured symbols and that it has been monitoring the outcry from South Africans of all races condemning the advertisement. The DA Federal Chairperson, Helen Zille, joins us this evening on Face the Nation to respond to that. Helen, thank you for joining us this evening. As the DA, how are you responding to this decision by the SABC?
Well, as you know, we have lodged a complaint with ICASA, and we will take it further. It will go all the way. We will have that decision reviewed because the SABC is a public broadcaster, not the censorship board of South Africa. And this is a perfect example of state capture. The ANC deployees in the SABC are acting in the ANC's interests, not the public interest. And there couldn't be a clearer example of what state capture does. The people who are making these decisions in the SABC are serving the ANC. And so they mustn't be surprised when we call them the SANC, not the SABC, because they're not acting as the public broadcaster. The first point I'd like to say about our ad is that the whole point of it is to condemn the desecration of our flag. That is the entire point. And the point that we are making is that that is what the ANC has done over the last 30 years. You spoke about those two lines coming together. Well, the ANC has blown them apart with all its race laws. You talk about it symbolizing the unity of the country. That's what we all believed in. That is what the flag symbolizes to all of us. But who's destroyed it? The ANC, and it'll be burnt to a cinder if the ANC goes into coalition with the EFF and MK and the PA. So we are protecting the flag. We are saying to South Africans, you have a choice in this election to defend the dream we all had that our flag symbolizes, or you can be part of destroying this country further. And we go on to say that the DA is the defender of the flag and everything it symbolizes. And if people want to defend the flag and our nation, the best choice is to vote for us. That is the point of the ad, to defend the flag. Surely everyone can see that.
Was there no option, Helen, for one of the leaders of the Democratic Alliance to come towards the end of the ad and say, as the DA, we want to stop the desecration of the flag, as opposed to show it burning like you do in the ad?
Well, we had 30 seconds to get the point across, and we wanted a punch to the solar plexus of South Africa. And we have delivered a punch to the solar plexus of South Africa because everybody has sat up and taken notice. Now, there's always a double standard in the media when it comes to the DA. I remember quite clearly seeing on SABC ANC protesters, especially in Mangaung, protesting against the ANC and burning a real flag, not the digital image of the flag. I've seen protesters burn down municipal buildings, libraries. I've seen them burn trains, taxis. I've even seen them burn down schools. That is something that is destroying our flag and our nation. No fuss about that. So the truth is, this outcry helps us depict exactly what the problem is in South Africa. It's not the DA that's committing treason. It is the president and the cadres who are committing treason. Just look at what the president has done. He spent 139 million rand on food for his luxury jet. Meanwhile, malnutrition in this country is climbing to staggering rates. That is treason. They've bought this year 50 million in cars, or 50 cars, I'm sure they're all worth 1 million each, so it's probably 50 million, in luxury cars, while they've destroyed the entire rail system. That is treason.
And there's no question about what this current government has done that has not been right, Helen. But when you look at the response that has come as a result of this ad and the people that are telling you that the flag is supposed to be beyond politics? You can criticize the ANC government as much as you want. You can demonstrate where the ANC has failed. But when you are using a symbol of unity, a symbol that has brought us together, a symbol that represents the hope of this country, that's you as a political party being desperate for attention and for people to stand up and listen, because you know you have to cross the line in order to get their attention.
The point we're making, Clement, is that the ANC has destroyed the dream behind the flag. The ANC has destroyed the unity of this nation. The DA is trying to save it. That is the entire point.
There are certain things you say also in this ad, Helen, that are not necessarily true. I mean, the first words in the ad say, this election, for the very first time, the ANC will lose its majority. That is not correct. You could very well say, as the DA, we expect the ANC to lose its majority. Or you could say the polls are suggesting that the ANC will lose its majority, but you are making it as though it's fact. And that is not correct.
Well, of course, we're predicting, and a lot of political parties and commentators predict that, and they've been predicting it all over the place.
But that's not what your ad is saying. That's not what your ad is saying. The ad doesn't say, as the DA, we predict that the ANC will fall below 50. Your ad says, for the very first time, the ANC is going to fall below 50%. That's a factually incorrect and misleading statement.
That is what every poll says. That is what every analyst says.
It doesn't make it fact.
We haven't got time in a 30-second ad to add all the provisos and the padding that you would like us to add. If we got things wrong as often as the media, we'd be in serious trouble. The media has said the ANC will fall below 50% again and
That's
again.
not true, Helen.
That is true.
Which media has said that? The media. Editorial. Yeah, that's editorial. You know very well what the definition of editorial is. When you talk about the media, you're suggesting to our viewers that it's a news bulletin or an anchor who reads a news story and says as fact that the ANC will fall below 50%. You are right, it's editorials. Editorials are opinion pieces. I can write an opinion piece, you can write an opinion piece. But no journalist says it as fact during a news bulletin or in a news article that the ANC will fall below 50%. And as a political party, you have a responsibility to also be correct in your expression of whatever you expect in these elections. So if you are going to make a straight statement like that, at least accept that you could have done it differently. You could have at least made a proviso that this is what we expect, or this is what the polls say, instead of misleading the public.
Clement, you've justified saying the ANC will lose its majority in an opinion piece or an editorial. Well, that ad is the DA's opinion piece, and we're allowed to say it.
The SABC says that you have to amend this ad if you want it to be ad. Is that something you'll consider, or have you decided that your recourse is going to be approaching the courts?
We're going to fight this. We are approaching ICASA first. That's the first step you have to take. And then we will approach the courts, because this is nonsense. And the ANC is not controlling the SABC, and the SABC is not supposed to be an extension of the ANC. Unfortunately, that's what state capture did and cadre deployment did all over the place. They put ANC lackeys into all the decision-making positions in all public institutions and state-owned entities. That's why you have the treason of cabinet ministers getting generators for their own homes while Eskom collapses. That's what we call treason. That is what's destroying our flag. That is what's destroying our nation. And the DA wants to fix it.
The DA's Federal Executive, Helen Zille, I appreciate your time as always on Face the Nation tonight. Going to bring in another guest now who joins us, Professor Justin Limpidlo, who will be joining us in a moment. But first, let's play some of the WhatsApp voice notes that are coming through. The question we're asking you tonight on Face the Nation is, do you think the SABC's decision to reject the DA's election advert depicting a burning flag is justified. Let's take a listen.
I am Chris Greenland, phoning from Pretoria, and I can assure you, as a person who has been at the top of the legal profession for over 30, 40 years, that the DA meme is nothing more than an expression of political opinion that is fully protected under the Constitution in terms of the article that underpins freedom of expression and opinion. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Karaba Mohale, and I definitely agree with the decision of the SABC. The flag represents us as South Africans, and the burning of the flag is the burning of the country. And we should not at any point agree to an incitement of violence or desecration of national symbols. There's a difference between South Africa and the ANC. There's a difference between the South African flag and the ANC flag. Politicking shouldn't cross the line. Thank you.
Hi, this is Busiso. Well, with this topic, you can ban the flag of the ANC, the EFF, or whatever political party, but to ban the South African flag was ill-advised. I remember when Solomon Kalushi Mahlangu said, "Tell my people that I love them and must continue the fights. My blood will nourish the tree that will bear the fruits of freedom." That his blood nourished the soil for the freedom that we are enjoying today, that represents the flag that encompasses the history of South Africa. Then you come and ban it.
All right, thank you so much for your inputs. Now let's bring in Professor Justin Limpidlo, who is an independent communications law consultant who specializes in broadcasting, media and telecommunications. He joins us now live via Zoom to help us unpack the SABC's decision to reject the DA's election ad depicting a burning flag. Prof, thank you so much for making time for us. Let me just get your general reaction first to this decision by the SABC. Do you think it's justified, understanding what ICASA regulations say around ads and also understanding what the SABC mandate is?
So thank you very much for having me, Bongiwe. I was listening to the comments that people made. They are comments, I have to say, the sentiment behind them I agree with. The burning of the flag was really shocking, and to those of us who, and all of us do consider ourselves patriots, love the flag, it was deeply offensive and shocking. But the issue is that this is a political advertisement by a party and by the official opposition, no less, that has been provided to the SABC to flight. It is not for the SABC to censor political advertising. In fact, this SABC is not allowed to refuse political advertising unless the technical quality of the ad is very poor, which we know is not the case with this ad, or if it meets very, very limited thresholds under Section 6(9) of the ICASA electoral regulations. Mm-hmm. And these say that if the ad contravenes the provisions of the Electoral Code, the Electoral Act, the Constitution, the Broadcasting Act or the Electronic Communications Act, then they can refuse it. But this ad does not contravene any of those.
Yeah. What do you make of this this reasoning by the SABC? Because in their letter to ICASA, they say that the SABC as a public broadcaster is mandated to promote nation building through its services, and the said political advertisement goes against the spirit of nation building. And they say it's on this basis that they've decided they will not flight it, because they have a responsibility to bring about content that provides and promotes nation building, and this ad doesn't do that.
Look, if this was an SABC production that came under the SABC's editorial control that was put out by the SABC, I would agree. I would say, what are you doing? This undermines I think it undermines our constitutional ethos. I think it undermines nation building. But this is not the SABC's content. It does not have to meet the requirements of the SABC's editorial policy. The SABC has no control here. This is a political advertisement which the SABC, by taking ads, by agreeing to run political advertisements, they can't pick and choose between ads that they like and ads that they don't like, unless there is something in the ad that goes against the electoral advertising regulations of ICASA, and this doesn't. And what we're seeing here then is that the SABC is essentially saying, because this would violate our editorial policies of our content, we are going to essentially act as censor against a political party when the SABC bears no responsibility for the conduct. I just want to read you a point in the regulations that I think is really critical. If a political party submits a political advertisement, the broadcasting service licensee the political party is deemed to have indemnified the broadcasting service licensee against costs, damages, losses, any third-party claims arising from the broadcast. So even if, in the very unlikely event that ICASA said, SABC, this violated your editorial policies, which I really think is beyond the realms of possibility, it's indemnified from that.
Okay. What do you make, though, as we wrap up, Prof, of what the DA says in the ad? Because they make a statement that they are trying to present as factual when, in fact, it's a prediction they make. So in the ad, the DA says, for the very first time, the ANC will lose its majority. So they are saying it as fact. Could that be the basis with which the SABC decides we are not airing this because you've got a statement in that ad that misleads the public?
No, absolutely not. Political advertisements, by their very nature, are not required to be factually accurate or correct. They're not required to do that. And the SABC is certainly not appointed under any of our electoral-related laws or ICASA's regulations to say we are going to police your ads to make sure they're factually correct. If that was the case and the SABC could reject an ad because it contains factually incorrect statements, that would have been part of Section 6(9) of the electoral regulations, which gives the SABC grounds for rejecting them. Factual inaccuracy is not one of them.
All right. Professor Justine Limpidlaw, thank you so much for making time for us. She is an independent communications law consultant and, of course, specializes in broadcasting, media, and telecommunications. All right. Some tweets from you have come through responding to that question we're asking you tonight on whether or not this decision by the SABC is justified. So let's see what some of you have had to say. Magai says the SABC is absolutely correct not to air this divisive and abhorrent advert. It stokes up the fires of hatred. That's Magai in Ngabaka. Podu says, while I disagree with the ad, I completely do not support the decision by the SABC. Freedom of expression is fundamental in a democracy. We also have some voice notes that have come through responding to this decision by the SABC to ban this decision, in fact, reject this ad by the DA that depicts this burning flag. Professor Limpidlaw says you've got to base your decision as a public broadcaster on the regulations. And if the ad or anything in the ad doesn't violate the regulations, doesn't violate the electoral code of conduct, doesn't violate the constitution, then there's no basis for the SABC's decision. Here's what some of you have had to say on our WhatsApp line.
Hi, my name is Alistair. I'm living in Port River, which is in the Theawater School of area in the Western Cape. I think the burning of the flag by the DA is a wrong thing that they did, because they're acting like people who riot. They are acting like people who are busy burning down the country. So they are instigating that people can burn down stuff. They are like rioters, and I don't agree with what they did.
Clement, I absolutely disagree with the SABC's decision to can the DA's advert. I'm not a DA supporter, I'm not a DA voter, but I think this decision is wrong. It doesn't violate any codes in the Constitution. It doesn't violate any freedom of expression rules. It doesn't advocate for hate speech. So I think it's wrong for the SABC to do this. It's Kanye and Gatlehong. Thanks.
Thank you so much for all of your WhatsApp voice notes. After the break, Bosa's Mmusi Maimane and Rise Mzansi's Songezo Zibi face the nation. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, we told you earlier about these two vibrant, relatively young leaders who have formed political parties that will be contesting elections for the very first time. Well, they join us tonight to discuss their campaign, their prospects in these elections, and the promises for the electorate. We've got Rise Mzansi's leader, Songezo Zibi, and Build One South Africa leader, Mmusi Maimane. Songezo and Mmusi, thank you so much for making time for us tonight.
Thanks, Clement.
No, good evening and good to be here.
We are just 3 weeks away before the elections. You've been on the ground campaigning. How has that been going? Are you ready?
Listen, we should have been ready a long time ago. The campaign started in January for us. So we have been ready. Mm-hmm. We've been going all over South Africa. It's tough, but the reception is great. It's tough in the sense that the schedule is very demanding, as I'm sure Mmusi will attest. But the reception is fantastic.
And for you?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. You know, I mean, I think in the multiple indicators of a campaign, one, we've been able to attract some really incredible candidates who've come from all around communities, and they are serving their communities incredibly. I think we've been able to engage various sectors of society, rich, poor, black, white, Indian, colored, in all 9 provinces. That's been really, for me, part of the thrill of being able to go through. And I think South Africans, what's really encouraged me is when you arrive in a community and people say to you, oh, you want to put a job in a home, and so a job in every home. And then people hear your message, which is actually quite encouraging to hear that people are starting to engage with your content and a new form of politics. Because you will recall that we're so institutionalized in South Africa to deal with ANC politics or this party's politics. It's been great to be fresh, to be on the ground, talking to South Africans about something new. And I think we're carving new ground that's progressive. So as busy as it is, it's been one of the most exciting campaigns I've ever been a part of.
Where are you mostly focusing your campaigns? And how difficult is it if you are, I know, Songezo, when you started with the Rivonia Circle, you started having dialogues and conversations with communities in even some parts of the rural areas. How difficult is it going back there and telling the people about the message of change, especially in rural areas where we know the ANC still has a stronghold?
Look, Clement, the only difficulty is that we can't be in all the places at the same time. Otherwise, the message is getting through. Our message for this election is that we need new leaders. It's the one thing that South Africans complain about. It's the quality of the leadership. It's the perspective of the leadership that we have. It is the corruption and so on. So that's the first thing. The second thing is our politics is premised on people's experiences at home and in their communities, and the kind of solutions that they need, not only to build a better life for themselves, but to have safer and better communities and a better future for their children. So the conversation is not difficult in the campaign itself. That's why I said there's a fantastic reaction earlier on. But that message is so resonant that the challenge for a young organization like ours, and I wouldn't use the term small, for a young organization like ours, is that you'd like to be at 10 times the number of places you are in on any given day. And that takes time and effort, obviously. But people are looking for a new politics, Clement. They're looking for a different engagement. They're looking for political leaders and political representatives who take them seriously, who are serious about accountability, but most importantly have got practical ideas that can address the issues that the old political parties just never talk about.
Are you focusing on the rural areas as well?
Yeah, I mean, given our model, we've had to spread out candidates all across the country. We're clear that the demographic that is fascinated by these elections, certainly between 25 and 40, have come in their masses in that block because those are South Africans who are most unemployed. So where there's a South African who cannot find a job, we've been able to engage them. We've had incredible success. I just came back from Gugulethu, and we're finding that communities that are left behind. So part of the criterion we use is to look at communities that are left behind, to look at South Africans where in many cases services are not being provided, and then furthermore to be able to say, could we build one South Africa in partnership with South Africans who want to contribute to making that change? So one of the successful models we then put on the table is to say, let's be a government in working. So when you talk about rural communities, I've been in Limpopo, Eastern Cape, and there where communities didn't even have water, we've been able to install boreholes and work with communities, because this has been a long-term project and will be a long-term project, because the 29th is one date. But in truth, South Africa will need building for decades to come. So we're very clear that let's build this grassroots movement all across the country and be able to focus on the long-term trajectory. So all across the country, I think the message is coming through. South Africans are hearing us, and I'm quite buoyed by the fact that even in peri-urban areas, when you arrive in cities like Johannesburg, eThekwini, Cape Town, you'll find that even in spaces like that, there are many citizens who are feeling left out, who are feeling like we don't have water, we can't find jobs, the lights don't come on, and so therefore our kids are not getting educated. What can you do? And it's powerful to be able to engage those South Africans, because the peace of South Africa is about, in fact, having one South Africa. If you leave others behind, you truly can't have one South Africa, even if you said these issues don't affect you.
All right, let's talk about the promises you are making for the electorate. Bossa promises to put one job in every home. What's your plan as Rise Mzansi? Let's start with the issue of unemployment.
So look, I mean, our overall message for this election is that we need new leaders. And part of the reason we don't have, South Africans are unemployed, especially those who either have matric or no matric at all. The unemployment rate amongst those people is 90%. So our approach to the question of jobs is to tackle the problem where it is most evident. So there are three solutions. The first is we need to provide training opportunities for people with matric or no matric at all. It really is difficult to get a job other than a piece job if you have no skill at all. So people have got to be capable of being absorbed onto the labor market.
Do we not have skills development agencies already?
The people are not getting to them. That's part of the leadership problem that we're talking about. Every quarterly labor force survey you will see, Clement, the unemployment rate amongst those who just have matric or no matric at all is between 88% and 92% for the last 18 quarters. That has come out. It's a persistent problem. And the government's response to that is expanded public works programs, in which they say if you're 35 years old and above, you are too old to get a job on those programs. So there's a lot of disgruntlement. But back to your question, Clement, so you've got to make sure that when there's a job opportunity, people can get a job because they've had some kind of post-school training. So that is the first thing. The second thing, Clement, is that we need to remove the boot on the neck of the South African economy, the issues that are holding us from growing the economy, Eskom, Transnet, crime, and so on, without those and regional and local infrastructure. So we're advocating for massive investment in those areas. We should have a stimulatory impact on the economy and start generating the jobs. But thirdly, though, is just an example. We can turn this crisis into an opportunity for economic growth, building new industries, giving people jobs sustainably over a long time and on a localized level. If we took a decision to use half of the $6.5 billion that's been promised by rich countries for climate change, and made an undertaking that we are going to begin a project to put solar panels on every roof in South Africa to get homes and small businesses off the dependence on Eskom, lower the cost of energy for each of those homes and entities. You begin to create jobs in the manufacturing of those solar panels, installation of those solar panels, and you reduce the long-term cost of electricity for households over time. And you can train young people. South Africa has got over 25 million homes. You can train young people over a period of time to be the ones that install and maintain that solar system. And you save the environment at the same time. Again, that is why we're saying you need a new leadership with new perspectives who can tackle the problems directly and therefore practically deliver on what people are asking for.
So a job in every home? How do you plan on doing that?
It's exciting because actually we look at the fact that 40% of households don't have a single person working in them. And I think, Clement, we can play around with language, we can do whatever. The reality of it is that if you live in a home where no one is getting up to go to work, that home faces the vulnerability of the kids dropping out of school, poverty increasing, the dignity of that family being undermined. For poverty is the surest way to undermine people's dignity. So having understood that we're dealing with particular homes in a particular crisis, I always think of the economy in two ways, and I'd like to paint it in simple ways. One, you've got to have an appropriate garden, and you've got to figure out what plants you put in that garden. So the conditions in a garden, you're not going to create jobs in a place that's not growing. So along with what Songezo is saying, of course, introducing SMRs for Eskom so that we deal with the base load. Of course, splitting Transnet into its component parts so that actually goods can move in and out and people can move from places of home to places of work makes a massive difference. Keeping our communities safe, because the asymmetry in this country is the fact that it's difficult to invest in a community that's violent or gang-ridden. Therefore, we have to ensure that we devolve policing lower down so that more and more crime can be undertaken. And on the infrastructure piece, of course, there are multiple infrastructure projects we can undertake, whether those are road or whatever, but one of the most crucial ones is broadband infrastructure, because if you reduce data costs, you're able to transition your economy into a more digitized one. So if we park those factors along with the skilling, and for me, the skills conversation is really not about institutions, whether those are skills development funds, it's actually have everything to do with our education system. The fact of the matter is that this government has introduced a form of Bantu education, which actually means our young people can drop out of school, cannot actually get to matric, 40% of them drop out, and just in an indicator like maths, let's take mathematics, a skill all of us will need in an economy that is coming. In all reality, of the million kids who started in 2012, many of them only 24% will pass mathematics at over 50%. So we have to get down to improving mathematics outputs for our country if we're going to transition our economy. On the second part, which is what are then the plants you want to put in this garden? My key suggestions is that we've allocated, at least looking at the fiscus, let's take about 220 billion rands, which is a significant chunk of our budget, and invest it into SMMEs, particularly into the township economy. That's when we talk about putting a job in every home and a job closer to home. The second component of that is let's ensure that through whatever infrastructure build program, you can employ more people. And then one of the most crucial things I want to suggest here is that we need a national civilian service. You know, you can say everything you like. Countries that are developing, you can take Japan, you can take anywhere else, they have a program where young people can be absorbed in a year, and certainly the Scandinavian countries have taken a similar stance, where you give them a year's program, they work for 6 months, they intern for 6 months. What you do at the end of that year is you've given that young person a work experience, you've given them a stipend, and you've given them an opportunity to participate in the economy. What we do know from research is that once a person begins working, they invariably are likely to get the next job. But the rate of the one who hasn't been working for longer than a year has been increasing since 2014 all the way now to levels of closer to 70%. So what we now know is that once you become unemployed for a longer period than a year, you become progressively more unemployable. So we have to get people some form of work experience.
What do you say to people who say, we've had these promises before from the ANC, they've just failed to implement them? Is that a fair assessment?
Again, that's why the leadership is a critical proposition in all of this. There is not a single suggestion that will work, no matter how brilliant, if you continue to have the same old political parties, the ANC in power. That's a clear thing that most South Africans now begin to understand. So that is the first thing. The second thing is that your analysis of the problem and the perspective that we bring into how we're going to deal with those problems also matters, because it goes with a fresh leadership that is more forward-looking and so on. The third thing is that South Africa's problems are self-evident. There are only so many ways in which you can run a school. The problem is a person who runs the education department. It's a person who is, again, it goes back to leadership, which is why we keep saying you need new leaders, you need better leaders, younger leaders, more forward-looking, more worldly, and so on. We can prepare South Africa for the modern age, and we don't have them. The ANC is an old age home, right? And we're talking about a future in which the technology those same people cannot use today will be obsolete in 5 years' time. And those people are supposed to shape our future. It doesn't get to work like that. And I think that is why an organization like Rise Mzansi, with the kind of leadership that it has and the grassroots base that it has, is a future that South Africans should look forward to.
Illegal immigration is also a hot topic during these elections. What are you proposing as Bossa?
Yeah, look, it's a full conversation. You cannot deny the fact that the best we can do is to ensure that every citizen, regardless of where they are coming from, is registered. And that's a broader expansion of what we do at the Department of Home Affairs, securing people's rights, ensuring that our borders are properly managed. But I do think, here's the point I really want to make. There are many interventions that we can get into immigration, and sensible people need to have this conversation rather than the classic, let's form buses and bust them out, or the classic lock them up or build a wall and ask Zimbabwe to pay for it. When there's water that comes into your house, you don't pick up a mop, you go look for the tap where it's leaking from. The reality of it is that ZANU-PF have destroyed Zimbabwe. SADC have got many leaders who have been dangerous for this country. It is about time now that we actually take on Zimbabwe for what Zimbabwe is doing. And I want to raise this point, Clement, because it's crucial. The ANC today proudly boasts the fact that ZANU-PF are going to be helping in the elections. What insanity is that? Because all that's doing is endorsing what already SADC, in the commission that was led by the Vice President of Zimbabwe, Nevas Mumba, who said the elections in Zimbabwe are not free and fair. Now, if you have an election that's not free and fair, a dictator is oppressing their people, why are we not stopping that issue rather than also just simply saying, well, let's just deal with our own borders, etc. I want to urge that we get back to our basics of saying our foreign policy must be built on human rights, and let's go deal with dictators when they occur.
What are your plans around policies addressing the injustices of the past? Employment equity legislation, land redistribution?
Listen, I mean, those are the obvious things that we have to do. But I'll talk about land justice, land and spatial justice first, and then I will address the reasons we've got so much inequality, because they really matter. The employment equity and so on is a given. Firstly, I think every South African who needs land either to build a home or to build a life should get it. And they should not have to be denied that right because they don't have an income. In particular for black people, land is spiritual. People perform their rituals. They let their ancestors know where they've moved to and so on. So land is not just a political football that we need to argue about from time to time. It is an essential part of nation building. We have said that needs to go together with spatial planning, because there's past injustices or land dispossession, there's population growth, there's urbanization. The rate at which we're doing spatial planning is abysmal relative to these, and we convert South Africans into illegal occupants of land in their own country. So for us, land justice is linked to spatial planning and spatial justice, so that people live closer to where they work, and there's transport infrastructure and so on. So it is very important that we use all the instruments available in the Constitution, including lawful expropriation with appropriate compensation in terms of the Constitution that we have. The ANC has simply chosen not to use that instrument. And it's already there. And instead blame the Constitution. But secondly, and very importantly, those kids who are not making it out of school and not getting matric, they need equity in this economy too. When we don't equip them with skills, we are confining them to a lifetime of poverty.
Okay, I'm running out of time and I've got 2 more questions to ask. Someone who's watching and says, the war in the Middle East is very important to me and I want to know which party I vote for and what its position is on that. Just quickly, as Bossa, what's your position?
Yeah, we've always held that as difficult as it can be, we need to find a 2-state solution. Is still the best way that we can go for. We call for a ceasing of violence and ultimately the opening of all possibilities for aid to be added up to Gaza. And ultimately, this is a conversation that we're having even with the Arab League. Everyone is having this conversation. I think it's important that we bring a peaceful solution there. And South Africa's contribution, having come through a system as brutal as apartheid, can play a very constructive role in being able to find that 2-state solution.
And for you as Rise Mzansi?
It's very simple. I mean, the end goal is a free, fully sovereign Palestinian state that exists side by side with the state of Israel. And fully sovereign means being able to issue passports, Palestinians being able to travel the world, Palestine being a member of the United Nations, a full member of the United Nations, and not the Bantustan that it is. Secondly, in the current context, a permanent ceasefire is important. The release of all hostages is important, and administrative prisoners, people detained without trial in Israel, is really important. And also unfettered access to humanitarian aid for Palestinians is important.
I'm wrapping up. Why are you not merging both your parties? You could be a strong united front.
Look, I think the long-term trajectory of this country, given that there's a proportional representative system, allows for multiple parties. We're going to amend the electoral law. And I think actually conversations are going to be had. My long-term vision is to say, how do we build a grand coalition of the opposition to take over this government? And then I think conversations will be had about how we best cooperate over a long period of time.
Do you have appetite for
I'm always open.
There will be consolidation, Clement, particularly over the next term. And it's not just a question for Rise Mzansi and Bossa. I think there's lots of political parties because South Africans are on a search for alternatives. I think there will be opportunity for those that believe in the same things to gravitate together. There is no need to rush it, but certainly consolidation will happen.
All right. Songezo Zibi and Mmusi Maimane, thank you so much for joining us on Face the Nation tonight. Thanks to you for joining us on this Thursday night. We'll be back on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Thank you so much.